Hey everybody, how are you guys doing? Hey Faye. Hey Brad. Hi John. It's good to see you all. Are you guys all able to hear me tonight? Let me know if you can hear me, please. And yes, Faye, I'm sorry, I am feeling a little bit better. I had a really bad headache last night. I was gonna go live last night, but I had a really bad headache, so I just decided to take an extra day and come in tonight. Hey, Digital, good to see you. Thank you for joining. And thank you, Faye, for your kind words. I think we're going to have a good show tonight. I've got, hi, Tamara. Good to see you. I have some really good information to go over with everyone tonight. And I think that we are definitely heading in the right direction in Delphi. So I'm feeling really confident that this case is going to get resolved. So I just do. And hey, Nermine. Wow, all the way from Egypt. Well, thank you. Thank you for joining. Very nice to have you here. Hey, Tech Death. Hey, Chihuahua. So good to see you guys. Oh, Tamara, I hope he feels better. That's so awful. I hate it when we don't feel up to par. It makes everything worse for sure. So I do hope that your brother heals quickly. So the topics that we're going to talk about tonight, obviously we're going to go over the Murder Sheet dropped a new podcast segment yesterday, and I want to go over that. I also want to talk about some information that Unroyal found recently within the last few days, that there has been a senior special prosecutor assigned to Carroll County. And I think that has gone unreported. It happened back on January the 20th. And I think that is really telling as to what could be going on in Delphi. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. And go over some of that stuff. So I hope you guys will stick around and we will get right into it. So yeah, the new Murder Sheet digital came out yesterday morning. It's really worth the listen. I think it's like about a half an hour long maybe, but it's really worth it. I will drop their you can get it on any podcast that wherever you listen to your podcast, but I'll drop the link to their podcast in the description below this live. Hey, Angel Bear, good to see you. Hi, Donna. Good to see you too. So in this new episode of the Murder Sheet, they went over a couple of things. One of the things that they're doing, I watched them live on a Gray Hughes episode over the weekend, and he had them on again, and they talked about some of the things that they're investigating, and they're trying to find more history on Tony Klein and what he was like in his younger days, possibly in high school, and just to kind of get a better picture of who this person truly is, because of all of the horrific charges that we've seen from the stepchildren, and just some of the violence that's actually come out about him. So when Tony was a high school senior, they interviewed a girl or a woman. She's a woman now, but she was a freshman in high school with Tony when he was a senior, and she was a cheerleader. And she talks about an incident that happened between her and Tony. And they were talking about a number of different things with him. But Tony had a reputation in high school of being a peeping Tom. So clear back in the 80s, when this happened in 86, I believe, he was considered to be a peeping Tom. And kids knew this. Kids were aware of this and these rumors, whatever. But anyway, one of the rumors that was talked about was that Tony was peeping in an open window on a woman, and she was sleeping. And hey, Alicia, good to see you. And the person he was looking at was sound asleep. And he wasn't just content with watching her sleep. So he got a stick and took this stick through the window and raised up her nightgown. And I mean, to me, that so creeped me out hearing that. It's like you never want to sleep with an open window again in your life. I mean, it just was so awful to think about. Hey, Jennifer, good to see you. Thank you for coming. I mean, really, can you imagine? Can you really imagine doing that? It's just crazy. And that reminds me of the story in the interrogation where they talk about the girl who was getting off the school bus, went home, and there was a man in a ski mask peering through her bedroom window. It just kind of gives you the creeps and just makes you like, wow, really crazy. So anyway, the young woman that they interviewed, I should say, who was telling her story when she was a freshman in high school, she talked about this baton twirling group called Deb Batons. And it was a group in Peru of young girls, young little girls up to teenage girls, because she was placed in the group when she was 4 and she was still in it when she was a teenager. And they would go to competitions and they would perform at different functions. They would go out of town for these functions and have stay overnights. Tony Klein's sister was also in this group. And I'm going to call her Gwen because that's what they called her in the podcast, but that is not her name. That is not her real name. But Gwen said that she was more familiar with Tony's mom. And hey, Curly J, thank you. And so anyway, where was I? She felt closer to Tony's mom and sister, and she felt like she knew them better. Tony was on some of these trips, but she really didn't pay much attention to him. And he was older. So he was older, more her sister's age. And so she really didn't pay him much attention. But the families knew each other, her family and his family. Her best friend lived directly behind the Kleins. She spent a lot of time at overnights at her friend's house growing up. So they were very familiar with him and where he lived and all of this. She described the Klein family as a prominent family in the community in Peru. They lived in a really nice house, well kept up house. And Um, it's okay, Curly J. They YouTube itself frowns upon caps, so just so you're aware. That's very frowned upon in YouTube, or on YouTube, I should say. But anyway, no big deal. Everything's good. So she was in her cheerleading outfit one day at school, and she talks about the fact that she very rarely wore skirts, and she had to when it was required of the cheerleaders to be dressed before a game or whatever. And she was walking home, and she lived about 7 to 8 blocks from the high school. And as she was walking home, she said she felt someone behind her, kind of like you get that feeling when you're walking down the street and you just have that feeling like somebody's behind you. And so she turned to look, and sure enough, there was a guy about 2 blocks behind her. And so she could see him, and she didn't think any more about it. And she just kept on walking. And as she was getting closer to her house, she noticed up ahead that there was like movement. She described it as really strange movement behind these bushes, and she could see it, and she knew there was a person there. And hey, bloke, good to see you. Hey, little Pookie, thanks you guys for coming. Amy Celeste, good to see you. I'm glad you guys are here. And so she felt really weird and kind of just weirded out. And she decided that if she continued walking, she would have to walk past those bushes. And she did not feel comfortable. So she crossed the street. And she got onto the other side of the street, which was the side her house was on. And so she continued to walk, and she quickly went up the steps and onto her porch. And she turned around, and she could see this person behind the bushes, and she recognized him. She knew it was Tony. And she was just kind of like, I'm safe, I'm home, I'm on my porch, my parents are here. So she proceeded to turn around and yell at him across the street. And she was like, hey, I see you. And she called him out by name. I see you, Tony. And he hurried up and ducked way down. And she was like, you're a creep. You better go, or my parents are going to call the police. And he quickly ran off. And he lived like the other part of town. So she couldn't figure out what he was even doing there. Like, why was he there? Why was he following her? What was that all about? And she said from that point on, she just felt so creeped out about him that anytime she saw him or ran into him at school, she would turn and go the other way. She said she was just she was just weirded completely out by him. Her husband also went to the same high school, and he was older than Tony. And they talked about this, and she said that, he's like, well, don't you remember all the rumors about him being a peeping Tom? And he even got caught at one point, and she said she doesn't know if any charges came from any of that, but she was like, these things happen and everybody talked about them. They asked her what she thought about everything that came out about Kagan. And she said when the stuff in December came out about Kagan and the CSAM, and she saw the name, she was like, oh my gosh, I wonder if this Klein is related to Tony. She said it was the first thing that came to her mind. And then when she continued to find out about him, she was like, are you kidding me? Are you absolutely kidding me? This is Tony's son. She said it didn't surprise her. It really, truly didn't surprise her. And so I just think it's really interesting, to say the least, that this all transpired. And now we're hearing about what his behavior was like in high school. And it doesn't seem like much of that changed, because as we know, he continued on making sexually explicit phone calls to women. He was arrested for that. There's criminal charges. And so thank you, Faye, for that. That is what my whole, I'll stop for just a second and say what's going on in chat. Yes, when I started my subreddit, Delphi's Daughters, the whole reason for that was to support the families and stop the Kelsey and victim blaming of the families. I was very, very sick and tired of it. And I made a point that it was not going to happen in my subreddit, in my group, in my community. I put forth kinds of rules and I stuck by them. And there is no reason for it. There's no place for it. And any content creator, whether it's here, whether it's a group on Facebook, whether it is a group on Reddit, whoever it is, whoever's moderating that or running those forums and those places, they can all do the same thing. They can all stop it. And if they don't stop it and they allow it to go on in their chats or in their comments under their videos, to me, all they're doing is facilitating the beast, because it's absolutely disgusting to me that people can just outright call these victims and families horrific names. They have no idea what these families go through. If you've never experienced a trauma, anything similar to this, you have absolutely no idea how you would react to finding out that your sister had been brutally murdered, to you don't know from one day to the next what's up and what's not. I mean, it's just a sad thing to me. I just don't understand sometimes why people get involved in the case, what their main motive is, because it's to me, it's even worse than disgusting. But yes, we don't do any of that here. It doesn't get brought up here. We don't talk about it here. This is a safe place for Anna and Becky and Mike and the families to know that if they want to come here and watch, they don't have to participate in anything. They can just watch and listen. They're not going to hear people bashing their families or bashing them. It's important to me. So let's get back to the rest of the podcast from the murder sheet. So they asked her about the picture, what she felt when she saw the picture of Kagan, and if she thought at all he looked like the sketch. And she said she didn't, but she definitely sees Tony in the second sketch. She said that the facial features, the smirk, how he holds his mouth, and his basic facial features match that. So I thought that was really telling. This is somebody who knew him growing up, who knew him, when he was a senior in high school, and that's what she's feeling. So basically, back in high school, Tony was guilty of committing non-contact sexual offenses, which is what peeping Tom or voyeurism is. However, I would have to say that, in my opinion, using a stick to raise the young woman's nightgown up, to me, that's assault. To me, that's an assault. So why that would have never been prosecuted, I don't know. one of the other things that the murder sheet let us know on this release was that they had reached out to Kagan directly. I think we've all been wondering that for a while now, if the murder sheet, if Anya and Kevin would reach out to him and try and talk to him or get him to talk to them. And they sent him a letter soon after the HLN interview aired with Barbara McDonald. And they waited. They didn't know if they would hear from him or whatever. And they did get a letter back from Kagan. And he basically told them that he appreciated them contacting him, writing him, and getting the transcripts. But he was very angry after he read them. He said that he wasn't happy because he felt that his short answers made him look badly or made him look poorly. He said that his lawyer had advised him not to do any more video interviews, and because his last video interview went so poorly. So I think that one of the things that Kagan realized is that, yeah, he looked really bad in that HLN interview. And he went on to say that he's just another victim of law enforcement wrongly accusing people of crimes. He doesn't want any bad publicity associated with his name. And I'm like, buddy, that's already done happening. You've got 30 counts against you, 28 for CSAM, 2 for obstruction of justice, and you're worried about bad publicity because of an interview? I mean, what does he think those charges say about him? I just, when I read that and heard that, because I was writing it down as I always do, I'm thinking to myself, is this guy just that out of touch with reality? I hate to say that stupid or dumb, because I don't think he's stupid. I definitely think he's lacking in the ability to keep his facts straight. I think that that's one of the things that happens to people who are pathological when it comes to lying. They tend to get their stories messed up. And I think that that's one of the things that he's done here. So I really do suggest that all of you go out and listen to that, because I thought it was really good. I think that the work that Anya and Kevin have done has been really good. They've given us more information in the last 2 months than we've had in years on this case. One of the things that they did tell us as well is that they reach out to law enforcement with everything, and they ask them if there is anything that they are going to put out that they shouldn't, or that law enforcement believes that this may hurt the case, or is there anything you want us to hold back? And Anya said that yes, there have been some things that they've asked them not to report, and so they have held those back. And so I think that, again, that is telling in itself, that they have information that law enforcement feels could hurt the case. Again, I know how much we all want to know everything. I know how much everybody wants to know what's going on, and we want every little tidbit of information. But right now is such a critical time in this case, and we all need to be aware of that. And what we report and how we tell the story can greatly damage this case. We need to let law enforcement do their jobs, and we need to only report on facts I don't believe we should be talking about POIs right now. And I definitely don't believe we should be talking about POIs from a year ago. We need to be focused and remember that everything that's on social media and all the things that are being talked about can be used in a court of law by a defense attorney to poke holes into the prosecution's case on beyond a reasonable doubt. And I think that that's where we have to be at, where we are right now. I am so happy that Unroyal, he and I spoke this morning for a while, and I was so appreciative of him sharing some information that he found a few days ago on my case. And he and I went over it together. And oh, bloke, I didn't realize that. Callie, I had no idea that was happening again. It's just crazy. It's just not what we should be doing. And I want everybody that's here and everybody that's listening to please know I'm not trying to preach to you, but I'm really telling you that this is important. It's really, truly important that we not do those things right now. Faye, you are so funny. Did you get my message on Discord, Faye? Because I sent you his information. So he told me to do that. So none of us should be participating, Angel Bear, none of us, and we should all speak out against it. We just really should. So, you know, like I said, everybody wants to know. We all want to know, and we all want to see this case solved. But I want it solved not just an arrest with somebody in handcuffs. I want them to appear in a court of law among their peers, and I want them found guilty. And I want the letter of the law and the book thrown at them. That's what I want to see happen. And I know the families want that as well. So, we just have to do our part here. And I think our part is kind of letting things kind of sit and only report on the facts of the case and what is actually happening and not speculating. I mean, we need to really be careful about that right now, because I just think that there's a lot of serious stuff going on. So anyway, I want to thank Unroyal because he led me. He and I do this, and I know there's some other people that do, but I'm super surprised that this has not been reported on anywhere that I'm aware of. I think there might have been one thread on Reddit about it, but back on January the 20th, in Carroll County Superior Court, there was an appointment of a special hold on one second. There was the appointment of a special prosecutor for Carroll County. What I thought is interesting, I always knew that there would be a special prosecutor appointed for Delphi at some point. I knew when they got really close to where they were getting ready to put the case together to be able to charge someone, that's what would happen. They would end up getting a special prosecutor. Well, on January 20th, one was appointed in Fort Carroll County, and the attorney that they got was Jacob Tallman, who is from Rensselaer, Indiana. And we're going to talk about this a little bit, because we're going to talk about what a special prosecutor does in Indiana. And also we're going to go over what a grand jury does, because I think you guys need to understand that process a little bit to know what could possibly be happening in the next months as we go forward in this case. But there was an order granting the motion for the appointment. and that happened on the 19th of January, and they went ahead and sent e-notices or emails to all parties involved, which was Nick McClelland, and the state of Indiana took the oath, because there has to be an oath accepted. The attorney who's being appointed has to accept that appointment as special prosecutor. And so once they do that, then there's an oath given to them, and that happened on January 24th. So one of the things that it talks about is the parties to the case, and the parties to the case is the state of Indiana, and what they have appointed them for are incidents that occurred on or about December. And if you remember what happened in Carroll County on or about in December, the Anthony Shots information was sent out to us or given to us by law enforcement. And I firmly believe that this is really big, guys. I don't think that this is just some, they don't assign special prosecutors for no reason. And we're going to get into that. So, but yeah, this was hidden in my case. You have to go and look under Nick McClelland's cases. If you go into my case and do a search on all of his cases, that's where you're going to find the appointment of the special prosecutor. He is, Alicia. He's really a good investigator. He truly, truly is. And it was wonderful to have a conversation with him this morning, and we were able to bounce some things off of one another, and it was really, really nice. And I thanked him so much for finding this, because I just think it's really big for the case, and I feel really confident. So let's talk a little bit about what a special prosecutor appointment means in the state of Indiana. I think we all may be familiar more with the federal level of a special prosecutor, because we've all heard those appointments come through the Justice Department in Washington, D.C., when special prosecutors are assigned to investigate the President of the United States or things that have happened within the executive branch of government or the legislative branch of government. A special prosecutor is usually involved in that. So that's one of the things where we've probably heard about them. We don't hear about them necessarily from the state level. And so a circuit court or a superior court judge can appoint a special prosecutor if any person other than a prosecuting attorney or the prosecuting attorney's deputy files a verified petition requesting the appointment of a special prosecutor. Now, on these documents that were on my case, it specifically tells us that the reason let me find it. Hold on, where it's at. Hold on one second. Let me go back and find it. It talks about a conflict of interest. And so basically what it was telling us was that for whatever reason, Nick McClelland was going to have a conflict of interest in the case that they needed the special prosecutor for. Which again, I think that that's very interesting as well. And Alicia is right. Everybody needs to pay attention and understand that law enforcement has so much more evidence than we do. We don't even have a tip of the iceberg, in my opinion. They have so much more. And so if Nick McClelland is in fact related to the Germans or the Patties in some way, that would be a conflict of interest for him to do anything with this case. And I knew back in September when they got the new building, and they signed the 2-year agreement to have that building. And everybody was all like, what do they need a building for? And blah, blah, blah. Nothing's happening. This is a cold case. I knew it wasn't. And I knew that they were preparing for something big. They needed privacy. They needed it to be away from eyes and ears, so that if they were interrogating people or whatever it was they were doing, that other people wouldn't see this. They wouldn't necessarily see who was being brought in to be interviewed today, or who was being deposed, or whatever. They needed to have that privacy. So that's what that building was all about. And so the state of Indiana, as all states have, they all have the ability to appoint a special prosecutor. And if they have an elected public official who is going to be a defendant in a criminal proceeding, that a special prosecutor can be appointed in that situation. If the court itself deems that appointment of a special prosecutor is in the best interest of justice, they can also do that. If for some reason the prosecutor that is the county prosecutor has become incapable of continuing to represent the interests of the state for whatever reason, a special prosecutor will be appointed. During the appointment of that special prosecutor, they have every 30 days, he has to report to the court his findings and what he's doing, where the case stands, how close is he to being done. All of those things, they have to be reported to the court every 30 days in writing. He has a length of time. They appointed him for 1 year. So he has a year to get this case wrapped up. And hi, Jennifer. I'll probably be back on with my face possibly on Saturday, is what I'm thinking. It's a lot to get my green screen up and do all this stuff. And tonight I was just not feeling it. So, but I miss you guys too. And so they, another reason to appoint a special prosecutor is that the court finds that the facts that has established the basis for the initial appointment of the special prosecutor still exist, then the elected prosecuting attorney who serves in the jurisdiction, so that would be McClelland, he's going to receive all notices of pleadings filed and orders issued under this subdivision. So anything the special prosecutor is doing, Nick McClelland is going to know about. You guys are so kind. Thank you so much. Hey, Michelle, good to see you. Thanks for joining. Hey, Habs Time, so good to see you too. Yes, Donna, his court date is in September. And they have, as far as I know, there's not going to be any preliminary hearing. At this point in time, a pretrial motion has been, they're not doing it. So that's what I understand. But obviously, things can change. Everything has been moved so many times. It's hard to know what's going to happen by September time. So this is the reason that they for Carroll County of why they appointed the senior prosecuting attorney, the special prosecutor. A senior prosecuting attorney may be appointed to serve as a special prosecutor in a county in which the senior prosecuting attorney, which would be Nick McClelland, previously served if the court finds that the appointment would not create the appearance of impropriety. So I think Nick being possibly related to the family is the reason for this appointment. He has the same power as the prosecutor does of the county, but the appointing judge who appoints him limits his scope of the special prosecutor's duties to include only the investigation or prosecution of one particular case or a particular grand jury investigation. This special prosecutor isn't handling the backlog of cases, or he's not handling multiple cases, whatever. He's handling one case. And upon making these appointments, the court shall establish the length of the special prosecutor's term. So he has to file that progress report with the appointing court, and he has to tell them what the status of his investigation is. He has to give them an estimated time for the completion of his duties, and he has to offer hang on a second. If he fails to do that, if he fails to file reports or request for an extended term under his appointment, the court itself may extend the term. So then this is where it becomes really interesting to me. If the target of an investigation by the special prosecutor is a public servant, the court shall order the special prosecutor to file a report of the investigation with the court at the conclusion of the investigation. A report filed under this subsection is a public record. So if for some reason there is somebody out there that is a public servant that's going to fall under this investigatory process by this special investigator, it will become public record. So I think that that's pretty interesting, since there's a lot of people around this case that think that there may be people in high places involved in all of this. So, it goes on to tell how they're paid and all of that, but that's basically why and how a special prosecutor in Indiana is appointed and why. And I think that gives us a little bit of insight into what may be happening here. I found it interesting that he was appointed the end of January. In February, we had the HLN interview with Kagan, and shortly thereafter, we had the interrogation documents released. All of that to me is it just flows with what's going on in this case. Now, let's talk a little bit about the grand jury and what the grand jury does. I served on a grand jury here in Illinois, so I know how our system works, but grand juries pretty much are the same around our country. But grand juries have been around since the 12th century in England. That's where they were actually traced back to. And so that's a long time. It's over, course of 5 centuries. The grand jury, it eventually transformed into a citizen safeguard against the monarchy. That was the whole reason why grand juries were there, to help protect citizens. So all but 2 states in our country have adopted a grand jury system. So roughly 1/2 of the states mimic the federal system, because there is the difference between the federal grand jury and federal crimes versus the state grand jury and state crimes. For the other half, a prosecutor has the option of seeking an indictment through a grand jury. Alternatively, the prosecutor may hold a preliminary hearing before a judge. So anytime you hear them talk about a preliminary hearing happening or not happening, that preliminary hearing is where both parties, the prosecution and the defense, bring forth their case in front of a judge and say, this is what we have, Your Honor. This is why my client's innocent. This is what the state has. This is why we feel that we have enough to prove that this individual is guilty. And then it's up to the court to decide if there's enough evidence to go forward with a trial. That is how preliminary hearings work. With a grand jury, you don't have a preliminary hearing. With a grand jury, you have a group of peers that hear the case, but they only hear one side of it. They only hear the prosecution side. There is no defense heard in a grand jury. The prosecution presents their case. They can call witnesses. And after they do the witnesses and all of that, then the grand jury deliberates only on the evidence that has been presented to them. They can't use anything else, just the evidence that was presented. And then they decide whether or not this person should be indicted for the crimes that they are being accused of. So that's how the grand jury works. So, I mean, to me, the grand jury system is a little one-sided, since you don't get the defense able to present their case. Grand juries can sit for anywhere from, usually, I think, 3 months up to 6 months at the state level. And in the federal court system, they can sit anywhere from 18 to 36 months. So, the state's systems vary greatly. I sat for 3 months when I did the grand jury here. And they don't convene daily. They convene weekly, usually, once a week. And they hear more than one case a day. So that's basically how that goes. So if both a grand jury indictment and a preliminary hearing are initiated by the district attorney, who presents the prosecutor's evidence to determine whether there is probable cause to bring criminal charges against the suspect. The procedure for obtaining such determines and varies dramatically between the two. First and foremost, a grand jury proceeding is unique in that it is conducted in complete secrecy. The only people present in the room during a grand jury proceeding are the jurors themselves, a prosecutor, a court reporter, who is also sworn to secrecy. There are no judges, there's no clerks, there's no other court personnel present. Instead, the grand jury foreperson presides over the hearing, and other grand jurors usually serves the role of the court clerk by calling witnesses, keeping track of the evidence, and performing other duties. Any witnesses that are called to testify before a grand jury do so one at a time. They are not entitled to have anyone else present, even an attorney. The witness may consult with legal counsel, but they must do so outside of the hearing room. Excuse me. The witness is questioned by the prosecutor, and in some jurisdictions, by the grand jurors themselves. However, because the prosecutor is the only attorney present, the witness is not cross-examined. So again, there's no defense there to go and do the other side. The witness's testimony is given under oath, just as if it's given during a trial. I am so sorry, but that just made me laugh. Who said that I could do a crossword in under 5 minutes flat? Chihuahua, you just made me laugh. I saw that. I thought that was funny. I do like crossword puzzles. I'm not so sure I can do one in 5 minutes flat. It just depends on what it's on, but I do like them. So I think perhaps the single element most responsible for the mystery that surrounds grand juries is its defining characteristic of secrecy. While detractors may decree that the grand jury's secrecy is fertile ground for impropriety to happen, or advocates of grand jury system may point to its secrecy as being a critical factor in its utility. There has been the Supreme Court in California said there are many reasons that the grand jury system functions secretly. It prevents the escape of those whose indictment may be contemplated. When you do things in secrecy and the person that you're going to arrest or the person that you're going to charge doesn't know you're getting ready to charge them, it's less likely for them to flee and try to get away. So that's one of the good things about the grand jury, because it is all secretive. To ensure the utmost freedom to the grand jury in its deliberations and to prevent persons subject to indictment or their friends from importuning the grand jurors. So, it's against the law to threaten jurors of any kind, or to put pressure on them in any way. But because the grand juries are secret, this also helps to protect them, and it makes the proceedings a little bit more less likely to have that happen. And it also helps to prevent subordination or perjury or tampering with the witnesses who may testify before a grand jury and later appear at the trial of those who's been indicted by it. So when you don't know who actually testified against you in a grand jury, because everything is sealed and secret, you wouldn't know that. And so I think that helps with all of that and with the tampering. To encourage free and untrammeled disclosures by persons who have information with the respect to the commission of crimes, people are more apt to talk in secret about things they know, especially about murders, if it's done under a lock and key, such as the grand jury, because they don't feel that their lives are at stake, because they're able to give their testimony in secrecy. Nobody sees them. Nobody knows they've talked. Nobody will ever know that they've talked, because grand jury deliberations and everything that happens is completely secret and closed. It's to protect the innocent accused who is exonerated from disclosure of the fact that he has been under investigation, and from the expense of standing trial where there probably was no guilt. The grand jury does not always find for guilt, or doesn't always find for indictment. Sometimes they clear people. So when they do that, this person has been saved being run through the muck of the press and social media and all of that, because nobody even knew that a grand jury proceeding was going on that was looking at this individual for a specific crime. So yes, it's, to me, there is a definite benefit of them for that reason. When seeking an indictment, the prosecutor explains the law applicable to the proposed charges, and they seek to persuade the grand jury that an indictment is appropriate, and works with the grand jury to gather evidence and obtain testimony. And to facilitate this, the grand jury has the power to issue subpoenas, which also allows the prosecution to compel witness testimony or the production of physical evidence to support charges against the accused. The evidence presented to a grand jury is not limited by rules of evidence. So hearsay and other normally inadmissible evidence is commonly allowed. As a result, many grand juries have broad power to see and hear wide ranges of evidence. So again, we have a really strong case in In this case, I think of not direct evidence, but circumstantial evidence. And a circumstantial case going before a grand jury has a good chance of an indictment. So, with that being said, in many jurisdictions, excluding California, the prosecutor is not legally required to present exculpatory evidence. And exculpatory evidence is the evidence that suggests that the person accused is innocent. And, you know, the Supreme Court of the United States has ruled that an indictment is not invalid solely because the prosecution failed to present substantial exculpatory evidence to the grand jury. So that's something to also be aware of when we're talking about grand juries convening to hear some of these cases. After the prosecution presents the selected evidence, the grand jury will vote to determine whether sufficient evidence has been presented for each of the proposed charges. Now, while the number of votes required varies by jurisdiction, only a majority or a supermajority, not a unanimous vote, is required. So that is another huge thing that's different in a grand jury. You do not have to have everyone be unanimous in the way they vote. But a majority or a supermajority has to be there. So if the requisite number of grand jurors agree that the evidence establishes probable cause, then they'll vote to return an indictment. And then upon the vote to return the indictment, the criminal case is initiated against the accused. So that's how you end up with that criminal case. And in my opinion, this may be exactly what happens in Delphi. I have said all along that I thought that they would convene a grand jury in this case. I felt that way 4 years ago. I still feel that way today, that they may have a grand jury look at this case when it came time to get it ready to go to court. Based on the influence of the prosecutor, who is the only non-juror present and who selects the evidence to present, various studies have suggested that the rate of indictment by a grand jury ranges from approximately 95 to approximately 99%. So it's huge on the side of the prosecution, but even if the grand jury does not vote in favor of an indictment, there still remains the possibility of criminal prosecution. In jurisdictions that do not require indictments for felonies, the prosecutor can still pursue charges through a preliminary hearing with a judge. And so that's something to remember as well. And so the procedure for the preliminary hearing stands in stark contrast. Preliminary hearings, like criminal trials, are held in open courts. They're oversaw by the judge and presided over by the judge. The accused is always present with counsel, and witnesses are subject to limited cross-examination by the other side. As with grand jury hearings, the rules of evidence are loose in the preliminary hearing, and the courts will typically allow evidence that may otherwise be inadmissible during the trial. So after hearing the prosecution's evidence, a judge who is more familiar with the law than a grand jury will be the one to determine whether or not a defendant should stand trial for the charges alleged by the prosecution. And that's how the preliminary hearing differs. And there are several reasons which it is appropriate or desirable alternative to a preliminary hearing. The California Grand Jury Association cites multiple surveys that have been taken from district attorneys who listed the following factors as influential in the decision to seek a grand jury indictment rather than use the preliminary hearing venue or pathway. High public interest in the case. Well, Delphi definitely falls under that. The fact that a preliminary hearing would take more time than a grand jury hearing. I definitely agree with that as well. The necessity for calling children or timid witnesses who would be subject to cross-examination at a preliminary hearing. And I think we have that possibility in this case as well. The ability to test a witness before a jury, where the secrecy of the grand jury may allow defendants to be charged and taken into custody before they can pose potential danger to a witness's safety or flee from the jurisdiction. Where the identity of undercover agents need to be protected. A lot of times that is huge. If you have undercover law enforcement that are around this case that are doing all kinds of things undercover, you do not want their covers to be broken. And it's best for them to testify in a closed grand jury that's secret. I used to see that all the time when I sat on the grand jury, especially when it was drug charges. There was a lot of undercover agents that we would speak to. The existence of a weak or doubtful case which the district attorney wishes to test. So this is another thing about Delphi. If they're not as 100% confident when they go into court, this is having them go before a grand jury is a way for them to test their case before they actually go to trial, because presenting their case will allow them to see if it's enough to get a grand jury to indict. The opportunity to involve the community in case screening, and whether the case involves malfeasance in office. So, that's basically a crash course in grand juries. Grand juries normally consist of 16 to 23 members, and they always have a specialized function. So they're definitely useful. I definitely think that there is a use for them in this case. As far as we know, I've not seen anything that would suggest that he does, Mark Evans, because Mark asks if Tony Klein has a lawyer. We don't have any way of knowing. There have been no charges filed against him that we're aware of. So if he has a lawyer, it's because he has obtained one on his own. Let's see. Let's go back here and look at some of the comments that I may have missed. Let's see. Most often digital, they have to answer the questions. I don't really know of any witnesses. We never had any witnesses that refused to answer questions. But I believe that if you don't answer the questions, even you can't. It's not the same as being in a trial. So I would have to look that up on whether or not they're actually held in contempt. But I don't think, in my mind, that the prosecution would call hostile witnesses into a grand jury. They're going to call witnesses that are going to hold up their case. They're not going to call in hostiles, I don't believe. Let's see. Let's see. Chihuahua says the process is so different with justice here in Australia. I guess it's because our population is much smaller, less people. Yeah, could be. I mean, um, that definitely could possibly be it. I'm not sure. Um, but we have we have so many different intricate little things about our laws and our justice system, and quite frankly, in many ways, it works well, and in other ways, it's broken. So that's my opinion. Let's see. Oh, thank you, Faye. I'm glad that Faye said that she thought this was my best live so far. I'm all about giving out information. I hope people find it useful. Some people don't have a clue as to how any of this stuff works. Um, and it's really important when we start getting into that area that people can understand a little bit better of what's happening and why things move a little slower than television or the movies. I get really tired, I guess, about people expecting things to just happen like right now. And yeah, it's kind of sad. Um, let's see. Um, yes, exactly. Alicia says a grand jury can be done multiple times and doesn't fall under double jeopardy. No, because a grand jury is not a court of law. It's not like being in a trial and they're being tried for an offense. It's not. So it's a completely different um, scenario and playing field. Let's see. Um, Chihuahua said our government offered a reward for the kidnapping of Cleo Smith. We have jail, not prison. It's one place, but different sections and court procedures way faster. Yeah, our court system takes a long time to adjudicate some of these cases, and in my opinion, sometimes way too long. Um, there are we do have laws that help that. People are required to have their day in court rather quickly, but there's just so much. Our court systems right now in this country have been so overloaded because of COVID. There was a lot of cases that they just pushed back and said, we're not going to hear these right now. We've got to hear the most important cases. Um, and because they had such limited people, because of COVID, limited jurors, limited, court reporters, limited everything, it just basically made everything backlogged in our court system. Yeah, that's just sad. Let's see. Yes, the grand jury hears multiple cases during the same session. The grand jury, as I stated, the grand jury is appointed just like jurors. They call you for grand jury service in this country, just like they would call you for regular jury. It just tells on the piece of paper that you get in the mail that you're being called for the grand jury, and then so it lets you know right up front that you're going to be on a 3-month term or a 6-month term whichever the state or county, wherever it is that you're at, has determined for their grand jury service. And then they let you know what day of the week it is so that you can work it out with your employers. Um, and you sit all day long. So it's an 8-hour day, and you hear multiple cases. You don't just hear one case. Now, in the case such as Delphi, because it is such a big case, and because there will be so much to go over and through with evidence, I imagine that that would be the one case that this grand jury will handle over maybe a couple of sessions. So, because there will be so much, because it's such a huge case. And that's just if they end up going that way. Like I said, they may not do a grand jury. They may decide to go ahead and do a preliminary hearing, but part of me just thinks that the grand jury makes much more sense in this case. So that's just how I feel. I don't know, I could be wrong. It's just a feeling I have. Yes, grand juries, like I said, get 95 to 99% indictments. We do not have royal commissions. We don't have anything royal in our judicial system. Now, we do have commissions, different kinds of commissions. I'm not sure what you're asking, but we don't have anything that would be named a royal commission because we don't have royalty like you guys do there. So we have we we had our 9/11 commission here, and that was appointments to look into what happened and get all the evidence to what happened on 9/11 so that we would know and present it to the American people. So it was basically an investigatory body that went out and gathered evidence and put together a report. And it was called the 9/11 Commission. We had a commission on the assassination of JFK. So we've had commissions like that. Yes, would be the answer to that question. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. You're welcome, Alicia. I appreciate you guys. Um, let's see. SD asked, why haven't people looked into the Lafayette Boys Club? People have. And I firmly and absolutely believe that law enforcement's aware of it. Again, why haven't people? I'm not sure. I know what that means exactly, but I know a lot of us have looked into that. And, there's a lot of interesting story or backstory behind that club that may very well prove to have something to do with all of this. There's no way for us to know. I mean, like I said, we don't have all the facts. We don't have all of the evidence. Let's see. Let's see. I don't know what you guys are talking about. Okay. Hey, Miranda. Good to have you here. Thank you. I'm glad that you found the channel as well. And I appreciate you. Um, and Tamara, I believe you 100%. Authorities do have more than they're sharing with the public. They are not required to share anything with us. And the fact that people want to demand that, it's like I said in the beginning of the live, we all want to know more. All of us want to know, but we're not entitled to know, not yet. They're still investigating, and they are the true investigators. We aren't. We shouldn't be investigating this case. That's not what we are here for. We are here to report on it. We're here to talk about the case and to talk about what law enforcement has told us and go over the timeline and some of the things that's happened in the last 5 years. But as far as calling ourselves investigators and whatever, that's not what we should be doing. To me, it does a disservice to the case. Um, yes, I think the case is huge. I agree with that. It's again why Doug Carter said that they were going to need 70 to 80 police officers at the time this case goes to the prosecutor for charges. That's what's going to happen. I mean, they have to have all of those officers to go through every bit of evidence, every bit, every single. They have to make sure every T is dotted or T is crossed and I is dotted, and there can be no holes. Everything has to flow, and that's why they're going to need it. And I think it's interesting that in the last week, there have been articles where the Indiana State Police are hiring experienced officers. These are not officers that are going to go right through the academy and then become state troopers. They're looking to hire already fully experienced officers. So I think that that is something else that we need to keep an eye on. And Blind Squirrel says, what is the likelihood of two separate and unrelated forces of evil converged on the Delphi trails and Monon High Bridge on February 13th? One evil being a pedophile and one evil being a double murderer. Well, I'm not so sure about that one, but I think it could be one and the same. The FBI has presented this case to incoming classes at Quantico. So if that doesn't tell you how they're utilizing this case to get eyes on it, I think that that is quite telling. But yes, they have presented this case in Quantico. And I agree with you on that one, Bloke. You know, I mean, how many cases, honestly, Bloke says, how many people are accused already? Imagine if they revealed the cause of death. You'd have 100 more false claimers. How many cases do you guys follow, pardon me, or have followed where you have over 100 to 200 people that have been called out in social media as being bridge guy? I mean, stop and think about it. How many cases are you aware of that, where that happens? This case is so unusual, and the craziness that surrounds it is insane. It's just insanity. It really is. Let's see. Miranda, you are so welcome. She said, thanks. I've been looking around for non-drama true crime channels, and it doesn't seem like you're into drama. No, ma'am. I don't like drama. I try to keep drama. This is a drama-free zone, and I will do my best to keep it that way. My mods are really good. I want everyone to be able to talk here and not feel bullied and be able to give opinions and talk and be kind to one another. It's the only way we learn. Um, Donna, you have a good night. Thank you so much for joining. Really appreciate having you here. And um, I hope you feel better soon. I have felt that way, SD, for a long time. I don't see how any person, not just YouTubers, anybody, whether whoever it is out there, whether it be Facebook or Instagram or Reddit or any of the areas that, TikTok that discuss true crime, think they can figure this case out when they don't have all of the evidence in front of them. They have very little evidence in front of them. In fact, we know a lot, but we don't have any of the direct evidence except for the video and the audio. So, and as you noted, I don't know how much that is going to help them in this case, but we shall see. Doug Carter has told us they know a lot more than we think they know. Yes, they already are. There's a multi-task force that is working this case. I think it's one of the things that may have led to a lot of the confusion in the beginning, is because we had multiple agencies working the case. And as we all well know, multiple governmental agencies do not always get along. They don't always agree. And I think that some people thought this might be possibly a lead, and other people didn't think that it mattered. And I'm going to be talking about that on Saturday, on my live on Saturday, because I do think I have an idea possibly of how Bridge Guy may have gotten out of the crime scene area. And it's just a thought that I have, and I'm going to go over that. And I'm going to have Skip Jansen on with me again. And he thinks the same as I do, that this may very well be how Bridge Guy left. So we're going to talk about that a little bit on Saturday night. But, it's just, we really don't know a lot. And when it comes to that, and I've tried to tell people who, get really angry when they start talking about the witnesses, law enforcement has never, ever told us who the witnesses are. We don't know anything. I tried to say this years ago. These witnesses, when they came forward and became actual witnesses in this case, I guarantee you law enforcement told them not to talk about them, not to talk about this case and what they know. And that is, I firmly believe. Yes, Skip. As far as I know, it's going to be Saturday night, you guys. So I haven't put anything up about it yet, but yeah, he's a good guy, and he always, everyone always wants to listen to what Skip has to say. So it should be a good night and a good live. So I hope you guys will drop in for that. But yeah, we're going to talk about some of the recent stuff that's going on, and how we need to be focused on what's happening right now in this case. Oh, I didn't know that, Tech. I'll tell him. I'll definitely tell him that you did. He thinks you're a great guy too. So just so you know. Yep, I agree with you, Miranda, wholeheartedly. I think that everybody brings a little something to this case. And I always like to hear intelligent people talk about the case. So that's how I feel as well. Hey, Grizz, I didn't see you come in. How are you tonight? Grizmatically's here, everyone. He's in the house. I believe that they're not supposed to talk. And hi, Sammy. And Sammy is correct. Eyewitnesses are notoriously unreliable. And when, you know, we don't even really need to have a, a class on it. We just need to pull from our own experiences as witnesses. Stop and think about it. You're at the park with your kids, or whatever, and you're playing with them on, the toys there for the children, and you're sitting on a bench, and there's 4 or 5 other adults around you, and you even may chat one up and talk to somebody or whatever, and you may be there for an hour watching these kids play or whatever, and you leave, you go home, and say, I don't know, the next morning, imagine yourself being asked, can you please describe the 5 adults that you spoke to in that park yesterday while your children were playing? I want you to describe them down to the very, very color of their eyes and whether or not they had scars on their faces. Did they, what were they wearing? What was their demeanor? All of that. And you have to do that in 5 different people. I mean, to me, that's just one example that screams it. You can't do that. Where our brains are not wired that way. That is not how we are. Our brains are supposed to work about memory and how our memories work. See, there Miranda says it. Miranda, I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. So very sorry to hear that. But she said that she was a victim of an assault and she couldn't give a good description of the man. It happens all the time, all the time. And so we have to take that with those eyewitness accounts with a grain of salt anyway. And it's to be, I think, to me, and Chihuahua made a good point, some eyewitnesses are so traumatized by the events they mix up their stories too. And that's the thing that we've talked about with Kelsey. She was only 16 years old. She was highly traumatized by the events of that day. My God, her sister, her best friend in her entire life, was brutally murdered, and she was the person who dropped her off that day. And she was the person her sister asked to go with them. And she told them no because she had to work. And just the how she must feel about that, and how she's had to work through that guilt and all of those feelings. None of us have any idea what that feels like. I think there are a number of things that we can look at when we talk about memory and what we're able to remember in traumatic situations. I go back to when I lost my own son, my 4-year-old son, to cancer, and he passed away at home. And during that weekend that he was passing, that whole couple of days, I had tons of family in and out of the house, and I'm here to tell you that when I look back on that, so much of that day is a blur to me. And you would think that I would remember every single moment of that day, the last day I was with my son. I mean, it, he didn't pass away until 9 o'clock at night. So I was with him that whole day. And there are certain parts of the day that stick out. Just, I still remember them as if yesterday. But the little things, I don't remember any of it. It was like it was just a complete blur. So, our brains also protect us. And sometimes our memories become foggy or not as clear because our brain is trying to protect us from that trauma. And yeah, it's there she goes. I mean, Miranda said she was 16 years old at the time. She has flashbulb memories. Um, you know, it's I firmly believe that it's our brain's way of protecting us from the god awful trauma that we go through and that we witness. Um, so and I Matthew, welcome, and I agree with you. Um, Alicia, thank you. I don't know how strong I am. I know that my son made me stronger. He taught me a lot about what's important in life. And I have a 4-year-old grandson right now. And when I look at him and, I think back to what I went through and what I lost, there are times when it's so raw and open, I can barely speak of him without crying. Then there's other times when, like tonight, where I can just talk about him and it's just totally fine. I appreciate you saying that, but I think my inner strength comes from somewhere else. And I'm a very faith based person. I went through a lot of struggle with my faith during that time, but I will tell you that he's with me every day, and I think that he helps me be here. I was talking a little bit about it with Unroyal when we were on the phone this morning, and I just told him, I said, because I went through all of that, it makes me hurt worse for families who lose children and have to bury them. There's just something that cuts raw because I know what that feels like. No, I don't know what it's like to have my child murdered, but I do know what it's like to bury them. And it's life altering, and you can never get away from it. And thank you, everyone. I appreciate all of your prayers and everything. I really, truly do. Um, I do not believe that's true, Curly J. But again, we don't know if she had two phones or not. And I will say that we will know. Yeah, who's your girl? I definitely do. He knew what battle was like. He taught me what fighting really truly is. We really don't know what fighting is until you watch someone try to fight for their life. And then you really realize, what that's like. And little Pookie, my hugs to you, my dear. Because I know that you know as well. Little Pookie's right there with me. And so she knows too. And my heart goes out to you as well. Oh, Tech Death, thank you. Um, but yeah, you guys, we've got so much to talk about without having to spread all the garbage stuff that's out there that people are making up and talking. I can't believe if it's true what Bloke was saying, that they're bringing up the JP stuff again. Lord Almighty, please help us. Oh, I wish I could give you a huge hug, Pookie. Just think of me hugging you right now. I did not mean to make you cry. Um, but I'm glad that we have this community where we can come every couple of days or whatever and talk things, and people can get their thoughts out of what they're thinking. And as we get this little bits and pieces of information, it helps us. Um, like I said, this case really means a lot to me. It always has. Um, I I desperately want Abby and Libby to get justice. Those two precious girls didn't deserve anything that's happening to them. Um, it just doesn't. Um, he used a number of different. What phone are we talking about? Oh, you're right, Oopsa Daisy. Welcome. I didn't see you come in either. She said grief is such a roller coaster of emotions, and the lows can be insanely low. Boy, is that true. There are days when you don't even want to get out of bed. You just don't even want to pull the covers down over your head. You just want to stay there and pray that the pain goes away. So yeah, and it is a roller coaster. It is, one day you're angry, one day you're sad, one day you're, numb. Um, and it's little things that can bring that all about. And life is precious. Life is precious. Our children are the most precious things we have in this world. And it makes me angry that they're always the ones to suffer. Stop and think about it. They suffer for the adults making the wrong decisions. Adults who are supposed to care for them end up abusing and hurting them, and God forbid killing them. Um, our children they should be everything, and it defies it defies common humanity and sense to think about what our children go through every single day. And it angers me when people stand up and say, you shouldn't have free lunch in school, you shouldn't have this, you shouldn't have that. Those are our kids, and there's kids every night going to bed hungry in this country, and we're supposed to be one of the most wealthiest countries on this planet. And to me, that's wrong. Our children should absolutely never be hungry. And that is just, you know, I'm like, don't get me started on our kids and how I feel about that, because I could really go on and on. But that's one of the things that brought me to the case. I think the fact that Libby took that video kept me here. I heard about their disappearance the day it happened. I followed it closely into the next day and was heartbroken when I heard that they were found. And I remember talking to my mother, who was still alive at the time, and she was in the nursing home, and she always followed true crime as well. And I told her about the case, and she wanted to know everything. And so she passed away in September of 2017. So for those few months, we had the time to talk about it. And I know that, it greatly affected her as well. She thought how easily that could have been me and my best friend, because, growing up in the rural part of Illinois and the country where I live, um, you know, we were always outside doing things and going places, and away from home and together. And you stop and think about yourself at that age and how easily it could have been you. So I agree so much, Tech Death. That is so true. No one should be hungry. I hate it. I hate that this country, and the world actually has people starving. It's to me, it's just absolutely ludicrous. Um, what is people not talking about, Curly J? Oh, yes. Yes. Yep. I agree. Um, that's what gets me, Miranda. There are so many sexual predators in this world. And you know what? The thing that gets me um, about that is, the more and more I look into Carroll County, Howard County, Miami County, all of that area up there, I don't know if it's just because I've spent so much time researching it up there and looking at everything, but don't they have a ton of them in that area of Indiana? I mean, the sexual predators that have come out in the 5 years that we have been talking about this case, it to me is just crazy. I mean, it's just crazy. And with Kagan, talking about him, getting back to him for a moment, we can't forget what happened to Kayla. Um, that's the girl he met, who agreed to meet him in the park. And when she got there, she brought a friend, and it ticked him off. I mean, he was livid. And he told her later on, he sent her a message and said that he should have slit her throat and watched her bleed out. And I think that that goes to speak to his ability. Everybody talks about, well, it wasn't Kagan. He's not the guy on the bridge. Well, to say that to a young girl, to me, that goes beyond just a predator. That speaks to a psychopath that could just easily kill you. Alicia says, I think rural areas have a false sense of security. I grew up in a rural town, and it could have been me and my friends or my daughter and hers. This case has really opened my eyes. Hasn't it, though? The same here. I always thought that I was overprotective of my daughter as she was growing up, but I really wasn't. Maybe a little bit. I always was fearful of losing her after losing my son. So she never gave me a lot of reason to worry. But man, when you stop and think that they're out with their friend and they're doing this or doing that, they're really very vulnerable. And our girls and boys are both very vulnerable. And we really, really have to do more to protect them. And I'm not trying to say that the Patties or the Germans or Anna or anybody wasn't trying to protect these girls. Please don't get that. Don't think that's what I'm saying here, because I'm not. They had every right to go out and experience the outdoors and that trail that day. What happened to them was not their fault, because they chose to go to a trail and be teenage girls. I do think we need to educate our children more on the dangers of social media. I definitely think we need to do that for sure. I see more and more young people with cell phones these days. It looks like parents are getting their children phones at much younger ages. And I think when you do that, you have to have that phone locked down. So there are certain things they can't do on it. I understand wanting your kids to have them with all the school shootings and the horrific stuff that's gone on. You want your kids to have the ability to call for help if they need to, or for you to check in with them whenever they're away from you. So I get it. I get why we want our kids to have those devices. I just think we need to make sure that we protect them when they have those. Um, hey, Casey Jakes. Good to see you. There's just so much. Very good, Tech Death. I like that. He says he's on his daughter about no messages from anyone we don't know. Very good. And explain why. I mean, not that you're trying to limit her freedom or anything like that. You're trying to protect her. Tamara says, sexual deviance never goes away. They don't change. They don't get better. They hopefully get arrested sooner rather than later. And it's so true. They don't get better. I think the offenders will tell you that. We've had enough people go into the prisons and have interviewed them and talked to them, and they've tried to do all these different things with them to try to rehabilitate. And even the offenders will tell you it doesn't work. It doesn't go away. There's something miswired in their brains. And that's the way I see it. And once it comes out, they need to be taken out away from society so they can't hurt anyone. Yeah, Digital. I see that as well. Digital says that Kagan Klein is a predator and Tony Klein is a super predator. And I would have to agree with him on that. The fact that Tony was able to do the damage that he did to his stepchildren and to his wife, come on. Those kinds of people don't change. If he was doing that when he was married, I can guarantee you that that rage and that violence is still inside that man. Um, it's and I agree. The internet is a good thing. I think there's good on the internet, but at the same time, I think it has to be limited. There has to be limits by parents, and you have to follow through with it. Um, very close friend of mine is in security, cybersecurity for a very large company, and he tells me that it's important to, monitor your kids' social media accounts, and if you're going to allow them to be on there, then you doggone well better know what they're doing. And some of the programs that are out there that hide their activities. I mean, there's programs out there that act like a calculator, but it's really a program for them to chat with other people, but it just looks like a calculator when you pull it up. Things like that. There's all different kinds of stuff out there like that. So we have to be aware of it um, and try to help keep them safe. Casey Jake said, I got a random pic from a girl tonight, told her wrong person, and she sent one in her underwear anyway. Told her to stop. Straight woman, and blocked her. See, it's just stuff like that. It's just, talking about talking to our teenagers and our young girls and letting them know that, it's not the safest thing that you should be doing out there. Um, we And I agree. Tech Desk says, I still think it's more bad than good. People are not closer. There's more division, no quality time together. And it's the truth. I mean, if you go out to a restaurant and you sit there and you look, everybody's got their phone in their face. People aren't having conversations anymore. They're having conversations with their phones. I know just for before I started my channel, at the beginning of February, I started my channel. And I will tell you that before that, I used to get locked into the TikTok nuts. I would sit there, I would get up in the morning, and I'd start my day, do my thing. And then I'd get my phone and I would check TikTok. And before I knew it, 2 hours later, I was still checking TikTok. I mean, that's how easy it is to just get wrapped up in that, especially that particular app and social media platform. And you just keep looking at it and looking at it. And they design them that way. They design them to reel you in and have you keep looking and looking. And so once you're aware of it, I'm glad I broke my TikTok habit. I'm hardly ever on TikTok anymore. I don't have time. My channel takes up my time now, that and my subreddit. So between those two things, I don't have time for Facebook. I'm not on Instagram anymore. I don't have time for any of that stuff. And you know what? I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything. It's crazy. I really don't. So I'm glad about that. Uh, yeah, Perry Freeman and Cop Facts. I can't say enough, you guys. If you haven't watched Perry Freeman and his channel Cop Facts, you need to. He's really, really good, and he's an ex-police officer from Colorado Springs, and he's really good. And yeah, Tech Death did the music for that movie. Wasn't it the movie? I think it was. Um, hey, Jerry Ball, how are you? Good to see you. I believe that. Little Pookie says the proof is that people that Facebook are more depressed. I believe it. I mean, Facebook is so toxic. Um, I believe a lot of the social media is toxic. You sit there and you watch this stuff and you look at the comments and the vitriol that people spew. I still do Twitter. I will admit I still check Twitter every day. And I tweet things about true crime, and I tweet about my channel and things like that. I tweet about the girls and things like that. But man, even there, you have to be careful because it can really start affecting your daily mindset. It really certainly can. And I don't miss Facebook. I really just don't. Um, and it is addicting. I'm good, Jerry. Thank you for asking. I'm glad you're here with us. Um, it is addicting. It's very addicting. And like I was saying, if you go out to eat with someone and you're sitting there as a group, stop and look at how many people are looking at their phones and not who they're with. Um, it's just, I don't know. It's just interesting how we've become. I was just talking to someone the other day about the fact that they're not teaching kids how to write cursive in school anymore. So writing is going to go completely by the wayside. I love writing. Like I said, I have 11 notebooks about Delphi. I write everything. I sit and look when I'm investigating or going through articles, or if I'm on newspapers.com and I'm trying to find, information. Everything gets written down. When I listen to a podcast or an interview, I write it down verbatim, word for word. Takes me a long time, but that's how I remember things. If I write them, I retain them. I've always been that way since I was in school. I was a great note taker for that reason. And so that's what I do now. I take notes. And yeah, you certainly can't talk about much of anything on Facebook anymore without getting in trouble. But with that being said, I think things got so out of hand during the last election cycle. It was crazy how hate filled. It was just so horrible, the hate that was being spewed over social media. And I will be really glad not to see that anymore, because I have no desire to to uh, to listen to that or be part of it anymore. Um, that's really cool, Miranda. I think it's important that we keep that. To me, I can't imagine not being able to handwrite in cursive a letter. I stop and think about all the letters that we have in our national archives in Washington, D.C. There's just all kinds of them. Some of them that come to mind are the letter that Abraham Lincoln wrote to the mother of the 5 sons who were in the war, and about losing her sons. And that letter is there. Um, there's just so many things that's handwritten, that's part of our history and our heritage. I just can't imagine losing that. I don't know. Maybe I'm old school. um, Thank you, Jerry. I really do appreciate that. Um, I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad that you're supporting the case, and you're supporting Abby and Libby. I really do. I appreciate all of you. Um, yes, it's terrible. There's certain topics that you just can't discuss because there's the hate and negativity that comes with it is just ridiculous. Um, but yeah, I don't like to talk politics on this channel because of that. I don't like to talk religion on this channel because of that. Um, I know I've often wondered that too, Tamara, is how will the children be able to write their names on anything, being able to still write out a check, being able to, I mean, are we going to completely do away with checks? They're not going to ever have them anymore. I mean, it's just really crazy. Um, and I agree with that. How are they going to read historical documents? Um, yeah, it's just really crazy. But yeah, it's some of the things that we've changed in school, we really need to take a look at, and that's one of them. But I'm going to get out of here, you guys. I've been here for a couple hours. It was wonderful talking to you all about everything tonight. I hope you learned a great deal about what might be happening with the case right now. Just remember that just because we're not seeing or hearing something doesn't mean that there's not a lot happening. I think there's a lot happening, and right now we're not going to see a lot of it. And it may be very well that we don't see a lot of it for a while, especially if they convene a grand jury. So, we know we've got a special prosecutor out there. We'll try to keep an eye on my case to see if anything gets posted there. I doubt it will. I really think it'll all be kept um, secret until there is an arrest. That's just how I'm feeling. But, you know, I appreciate all of you. I'm so glad you came and spent the night with me. And we got to have this chat and talk because I do appreciate each and every one of you. I hope you all are safe. Be safe out there. And all of you that have family members or are suffering illness or have lost someone, please know that you're in my prayers. And I think it'll probably be 8 o'clock, Miranda, on Saturday with Skip. So 8 o'clock is my plan at this point in time. So I will get that completely ironed out with him tomorrow. But he told me he would be available. So hopefully that stays that way and we don't have to reschedule it. But yep, so that's what I'm hoping for. And we will look forward to seeing you all on Saturday. Have a great rest of your week and take care.